Hey folks, welcome back to Sidetracks. It occurred to me the other day that I haven't put together a designer diaries video in a while, and I didn't want you to think I hadn't been working on my game designs, so I thought I'd give you a little update on where we're at. The last time I put together a design diaries, I was getting ready for PAX Unplugged board game convention in Philadelphia, which was in early December, and I was getting my prototype updated, getting everything ready to take it there for some play testing. And I got some really great play testing done at PAX. The Unpub room, so they have an area called the Unpub room where game designers can come in and play test with people. People will just drop by and test out your game and give you some feedback, or you can schedule sessions and things, but there's a designated number of tables. It's pretty sizable. I'd say maybe there's 20 or 30 tables in there, and they have scheduled time. There's kind of a morning and afternoon and an evening shift. Well, by the time I knew what my schedule was going to be for PAX and went to sign up for one of those slots, they were all gone, which tells you there's a lot of people out there designing board games. But they also have sort of an open play test time where you can come in. It's usually from 8 to midnight. You can come in and just grab a seat, and you don't have to be on their schedule or have a reservation. So I thought what I would do is we were working the game publishers area in the morning for a company, and I thought, well, I'll go up to the Unpub area in the evening and see if I could set up my game and just catch some people and try to play. So the first day that I went up there, I went up early, and because I was just killing some time, I wanted to get out of the convention hall, which was super busy and packed, and try to find an area where I could stretch out a little bit, ease my feet, maybe grab a snack, and just relax for a little while. So I went up and I wanted to see where the Unpub area was, and I went up there and scoped it out. It was pretty cool, and I realized there was an open gaming area adjacent to that. It was just open tables. Anybody could come and go as they pleased. And I thought, well, first of all, I wasn't super excited about the 8 to midnight thing because we were working the publisher's booth at the game convention during the day. And by that time of night, I start to get tired, and explaining games to people and things, when you're fatigued, you're not as good at it, and I didn't want that to reflect on people's feedback. So I wasn't super excited about that 8 to midnight thing, but I thought if that's my only option, that's what I'm going to do. Well, I went up there and I realized, I could just set up in this open play area next to the Unpub thing, not necessarily have to be in that designated square box that they had. And I could still probably grab some people and do some play testing, but I wouldn't have to wait till 8 o'clock at night to do it. So that's what I did. I went up and relaxed and grabbed a little table off to the side, and I set up my game and just kind of looked available, I guess. And as people walk by and they might be curious, or they might say, hey, what's this? I would introduce it to them, and then I'd ask them, hey, you wanna try it out? And I got some really nice people. Trying to think, that first day, I think I got maybe 3 play tests in, or 4. I remember there was a real nice young couple. And the thing about play testing at a convention is these people are gamers. So, they play a lot of games. So it's easy to teach them because, frankly, my games, you try to be innovative with your game designs, but nothing is truly innovative. So if they have a point of reference from another game, it's way easier to teach people new games when you can say, oh, it's kind of like this in this other game, or it's like this with a twist, And so it's much easier to explain the games, but then also they can give you much more detailed and pointed feedback as opposed to just playing with friends or family who are sort of casual gamers and don't game a whole lot. So this couple, they were great. They gave me some really great sort of pointed feedback, and they were really happy with the game. Like, I was pleased. You could tell they were having a good time and they really liked it. The second guy that I played with, It was just an individual gentleman. He and we played a 2-player game. And one of the things I've been worried about a little bit with this game, I'm talking about Drum Major, of course. The one thing I've been worried about the whole time is that I'm not sure that it works well with 2 players. And I'm still on the fence as to whether or not I need to come up with sort of a specific 2-player variant or a special set of rules just for 2 players. Because the game plays 2 to 5, but it's actually more fun and it's a better game, I think, with, say, 3, 4, or 5 players. So I was a little worried about that, but I was glad to have somebody who was willing to play test at 2, because I think prior to that, I'd only tried it maybe 1 or 2 times as a 2-player game. And some of that was just me playing against myself, which is, it's hard to, get a good feel for it. And this guy, I don't want to say he was a curmudgeon, but he was not effusive with praise. It didn't seem like he was, he was somebody who gave out kudos lightly and generously. So he had some good feedback. And again, some of it was critical of that it was a little bit slow and stuff, but it was right on the money. And so I would say he didn't hate the game. I wouldn't even say he disliked it. He just thought it was a little dry and it wasn't quick enough. There wasn't enough excitement. It was a little too repetitive for him. So that was good. Having that constructive criticism and feedback was good. And it really reinforced with me that I might need to do something to tweak this to make it better at 2 players, to make the fun come through at a lower player count. And then the third play test I had that day was with a couple, husband and wife from New York. And man, they loved the game. And it made me feel so good that how much fun they were having playing this game. So the 3 of us played together, and they just got it. They really loved the theme. They understood the mechanics real quick. And frankly, their comment at the end was, man, if this was available on Kickstarter tomorrow, we'd buy it. And so, at the end of a long day, that felt pretty darn good to get that, sort of affirmation that, hey, this isn't stupid, or I'm not, these people had none of the people who play tested had any stake in the game, right? They're just anonymous people, again, which is very helpful. And one of the reasons I wanted to play test at the convention was because you need honest feedback from people. Friends and family are great, but they don't want to hurt your feelings. And they're going to tell you, if you play with your mom, she's going to tell you it's the greatest thing ever. Just like, your macaroni Christmas ornament that she hangs on the Christmas tree, right? Even if it's the ugliest thing in the world. So, having those play tests was great, and I got some really great feedback. The next day, I planned on doing the same thing, but when I went up to that unpub area, it was packed, and then the open gaming area all around it was packed as well. Like, you couldn't even find a table. There were people sitting on the floors. I think this was Saturday night. There were just people sitting on the floor in the hallways playing games. There just wasn't enough seating. And I thought, it was just awful. It was so jam-packed. And at that point, it was the second day there. You've been there all day, worked in the morning, pretty tired. I just didn't feel like fighting the crowds. And I thought, well, I'll go back down to the main convention area. The vendors hall was closed at that point. So it was just the open gaming area and some of the other stuff. And I thought, we'll see. And if there's nothing down there, if it's just like this, then maybe I'll just leave early and not stick around. So anyway, I found an open table in a good spot. I went ahead and set up, and a guy and his teenage daughter came along and were interested. And so I got a play test in with them. And he, by the way, was a game designer. He was somebody who's designing games on the side like I am. And so him and his daughter sat down and played. And he liked the game a lot too. The thing that he said that I felt really good about, he was asking me, when did I start working on it? How long? And I told him I've been working on the game for about 6 months. And he was like, really? He goes, I would have thought you'd been working on this for a few years. He said it's really smooth and it plays really smoothly. And so that made me feel pretty good too, that, you know, he felt like it was pretty polished for as much time as I'd spent on it. So I got in 4 solid play tests there at PAX Unplugged, and that was really, really helpful. So a couple of the things tweaks that I've made to the game since then. One is I redid the action cards, and this was a pretty significant undertaking because each player has 20 action cards, and there's 5 players, so that's 100 cards. So if you're doing a major rework of the cards, you got to redo 100 different cards, which means redesigning them, reprinting them, re-sleeving them, and so it's not a minor effort to redo those cards. But in conjunction with that, the one thing I kind of didn't like was the way I had the player aids. And I had an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper laminated for each player. That was the player aid. And it gave sort of the list of all the different actions you could take. And it also reminded you what the colors of the dice were and some things, just sort of a reference sheet. Mainly so when you're learning the game, you don't have to ask questions all the time, or you could just go back to that sheet to confirm, oh, okay, right, the yellow dice are trumpets, the white dice are percussion, or whatever. So it worked. Those player aids worked, but they were kind of clunky because they're 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. They take up a lot of room, so there's not a great place to put them on the table. And I liked the functionality of them, but I didn't like the sort of the user interface. Going back to the action cards, the other thing about those was they just showed the symbols. Each action had a set of symbols, and you know, when you take that action, it sort of gives you an indication of what you can do. And I have been going back and forth since the beginning on this. Do I just include symbols? Do I include the symbols with a title for each card? Do I include symbols, a title, and a description of the action? And I like the symbology. I think it's pretty clear and it works well. And especially once you've played the game a few times, it becomes intuitive. It's understandable. When I first looked, I tried with the title, the symbology, and a description. They were way too cluttered. I thought the cards were kind of ugly and they were just too cluttered. And that was the idea behind this player aid. So you have the symbology, and then if you don't understand the symbology, if you look at it and you go, I'm not sure I understand what that's telling me, you can go to this player aid to confirm, you know, this is what I'm allowed to do with this action. What we came up with out of those play tests was to go to the idea of the symbology with a title for each card. So you don't have a description of the action, but you do have a title for each action. And that allowed me to redesign the player aids as well. And so now I was able to get the player aids down to a half sheet. So front and back, much smaller. And each action has a title, which is keyed to that player aid. So it's much quicker and easier to look it up and say, okay, if I'm taking the recruit action, what does that allow me to do if I can't decipher it from the symbology? So that was a major upgrade, I would say, and something that I think makes the game a lot better. Both the action names on the cards and the player aids I like way better. The next thing that I did that took a good bit of time after PAX was I redid the whole rule book. So when I started out, I was working in Microsoft Word and everything was in Microsoft Word. And I've been slowly learning Canva over time, and I've been porting everything. When I go to make design changes, I was switching from Microsoft Word and Excel, where I originally had the design, and putting everything into Canva, which was a time-consuming effort because you're basically redesigning everything. But I did the same thing with the rule book. And the rule book is really 2 parts. It's the rule book, which is pretty concise, actually. It's only 4 or 5 pages with illustrations, and some of that is a component list. And so there's only a couple pages of rules. But then there's a pretty extensive appendix that goes with that has detailed explanations. If you ever run into a card that you don't understand, just like in Wingspan, how there's an appendix that explains every single card, every single bird. I have that for Drum Major. So I had those as two separate documents. I also have a bunch of history stuff in there because one of the things I'd really like to do with this game is to highlight some music and band history. For instance, some John Philip Sousa would be a logical one, but I'd love on the director cards and on the judges' bonuses, I'd love to get names in there like Dizzy Gillespie and Louis Armstrong and Conrad Hutchinson from Grambling with the HBCU marching bands. And I'd like to get some of those different historical figures built into the game. It's an aspect of game design that one of my favorites is a game called Founding Fathers that's all about the Constitutional Convention. And in their rule book, there's sort of a little history book appendix to it that explains every single card, which were the delegates to the Constitution, and then sort of what they did when they were there. I'd love to have the same thing for Drum Major. All these different influential figures in the history of not just marching band music, but also sort of that jazz age, Buddy Rich type people, different folks who are influential musicians, and include that in the game. And so anyway, I had all that put together in one document now in Canva, the rule books and all the appendices in one. And that took some time too, but I added a bunch of illustrations to the rules as well. One of the things that really helped in the playtest was listening to the questions that people asked and trying to understand which rules or which mechanics and things in the game that they didn't quite understand or it took a little bit of effort to understand. And that's where I included illustrations in the rule book, because I thought if this is a question that people keep asking, there needs to be a clear answer in the rule book so that they can go there and figure it out themselves. It's one thing for me to sit and teach people, but understanding the rules straight from the rule book is a whole different thing. And so building those illustrations into the rule book took a while too, but I think it's really solid now. So the next step really is I want to get some blind play testing done. I want to give the game to people. I only have one prototype, so I need to be able to give it to people that I know I can get it back from, and it'll be in one piece because I've only got one copy. But I would like to be able to give it to folks, have them play the game from the rule book, because that'll really test out the rule book and determine whether or not it makes sense and if I forgot anything or if something is not written clearly, that kind of stuff. So blind play testing is next, and I'm looking for some blind play testers. So if you're interested in giving it a try, let me know. I was supposed to have a meeting set up with the board game publisher at PAX, but that fell through. He had to cancel at the last minute, which was okay. I wasn't, totally disappointed by that. But to prep for that, one of the things I created was what's called a sell sheet, which is basically a one-page flyer that board game designers create to be able to hand to a publisher that just gives you an overview of your game. It shows a little bit about how many components there are, so that way they know what, they could figure out what it's going to cost to produce the game. Gives a little blurb or an overview of what the game's about. Explains just a couple of the basic rules so that they can get a feel for what this game is. So that way, after you're meeting with them, they take it home and they go, "Who was that guy I met with?" And they pull out that sell sheet and go, "Oh yeah, right. He's the guy with the band game, right?" So anyway, that fell through, which was kind of disappointing. But on the plus side, I created a sell sheet for that. So it sort of forced me to do that and get it ready. Now, one of the things that I've done since PAX was over, I mentioned that Levi and I were at PAX Unplugged working for a board game publisher that we've started to build a relationship with. We've worked with them at a couple different conventions now, selling their games at their booth. And that was really a way for us to be able to go to a few of these conventions, start to meet people and network, but also defer some of the costs of attending these conventions. So we work their booth and we sell their games, and then we get to go have fun and do our own thing the rest of the time that we're there. So anyway, as a follow-up after PAX Unplugged, I did share my sell sheet with them and my rule book I know they're super busy people. I mean, insanely busy. They're bringing games in to America from other countries. They've got their own publishing schedule with new games coming out. They're running Kickstarters. These people are so insanely busy. I was even hesitant to approach them and sort of ask for a favor because I just know how swamped they are all the time. But I just said, hey, if you get a minute someday, would you mind taking a look at this and just give me a quick bit of feedback right off the bat? Am I on the right track? Am I way off base or whatever? And I'm sure they spent a total of about 5 minutes looking at it because that's probably about all the time they could spare. But the one thing, and I've heard it in other game designer podcasts and things, is streamline. And that was the bit of advice they gave me, was streamline. And also my sell sheet. There were a few things on my sell sheet and I knew I kind of put that together quickly at the last minute. I knew it wasn't great. I wasn't super happy with it. There were a few things there that they gave me some tips on that I think will make it much better. And on the rule book, and as far as the rules, I'm sure they didn't dive into it in detail. But that was their general advice: streamline. A lot of board game designers throw everything in the kitchen sink in their game, and it's just too much. The rules are too complex. The game is way more than it needs to be. And the games that I love tend to be the games that are really streamlined, like Ticket to Ride. It's one of my favorite games ever. It's a very simple game when it comes down to it. So those are the kinds of games I'm trying to make anyway. But the one thing that occurred to me at that, and the reason I have a hunch that the reason that maybe their impression was that the game wasn't streamlined enough, it just at a quick glance, and that's very helpful, that's what I was looking for, is because I put that rule book and appendix together in one file. It ends up being, 25 pages or something, which makes it look like a 25-page rule book. And that gives you the idea that this is a really detailed, complex game. So what I need to do is I'm going to split those back out, the rule book and the appendices, into two separate documents. And the lesson that I learned there was, in the future, when I share this game with publishers, the first thing and probably the only thing I'll share at the beginning is a sell sheet and a rule book, and not those appendices. Because if you look at a 25-page rule book, even me, I'll be like, oh, that's just too much, right? But the rule book for this game is actually only 4 pages. And the rest of it is all the appendices. It's the history, it's the detailed Q&A and rules clarifications in case you get into these obscure, things or have detailed questions. And so the game really is pretty simple. But that's going to be a task coming up for me. I want to redo the sell sheet. I want to split the rule book. I'm going to go back through. I've sort of taken a month or two off here from really being in the weeds with the game design, because after PAX, first of all, I was tired and it was Christmas time. I wanted to spend time with my family. But also I just wanted to take a break from it, because when you're down into the weeds for a long time, you sort of lose sight of it, and you can read through rules, 10 times and they say one thing to you, but they don't actually say that if somebody with fresh set of eyes is looking at it. So I wanted to sort of reset and give myself a fresh set of eyes and get back into it sort of with a clear head. So that's what I'm going to be doing. I think the next steps for me, once I tweak those few things, I'd really like to get to a couple of Protospiel or Unpub events. I was kind of hoping to go to one in Baltimore. Well, there was one in Cleveland a few weeks ago, but I couldn't make it to there because we were down in Texas at the time. There's one in Baltimore at the end of March, but it just so happens that my kid's high school musical is that weekend. There's an Unpub event out in St. Louis. There's one in Madison, Wisconsin that's supposed to be real good. The only trouble right now is the ones that seem to fit the schedule for me are pretty far away, and which means it's going to be costly to go. So I'm trying to find ones that are closer to home, but those ones haven't been fitting my schedule. But anyway, I'd really like to get to a couple of those events, because at those you tend to have people game designers, other game designers who will try your game. And also you have people who are specifically there to test prototypes, and they know that that's what it's all about. But you also can have board game publishers sort of milling about and playing games and play testing, so you never know when somebody might notice your game and, you know, take a liking to it or recommend it to somebody or say, hey, did you see that game over there? So that's really my goal over the next few months, is to try to get to one or two of those if I can find ones that fit my schedule. But I think the game is in pretty good shape right now. If you're interested in blind play testing, hit me up, let me know, and I'd love to get the game to you and get some feedback. So we're going to keep chugging along and see if we can move the ball forward on Drum Major. I'd love to get this game published someday, and just take it one step at a time. So we'll see you later.